The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the train platform as Eleanor Vaughn clutched her valise with trembling fingers, scanning the dusty streets of Wheatland, Wyoming territory with wary eyes. The year was 1878, and she had traveled over 1,000 miles to escape the whispers that followed her like ghosts through Boston's elite drawing rooms. Her reputation in tatters, her family name disgraced, Eleanor had nothing left but the clothes in her trunk, a small pouch of savings, and an advertisement torn from a newspaper promising teaching positions in this remote western settlement. The station was nearly deserted as the train pulled away behind her, its whistle fading into the distance like the life she'd left behind. Eleanor smoothed down her travel-worn navy blue dress, feeling conspicuously Eastern in her high-necked collar and tightly laced boots. Her chestnut hair was coming loose from its pins after days on the rattling train, and she felt grimy and exhausted. "Miss Vaughn?" A weathered older woman approached, squinting at her through spectacles perched on a sharp nose. "I'm Mrs. Abernathy from the town council. We've been expecting you." Eleanor forced a smile, willing her voice not to betray her nerves. "Yes, thank you for meeting me. I'm grateful for the teaching opportunity." Mrs. Abernathy looked her up and down with an appraising eye. "Well, you're younger than we expected. 24, was it?" 22, Eleanor corrected, trying not to fidget under the scrutiny. Well, the school term starts in 2 weeks. I've arranged temporary lodging for you at the Wheatland Inn until we can find something more permanent. The previous schoolteacher, Miss Holloway, had to return east rather suddenly. Family emergency, she said. The older woman's tone suggested she didn't entirely believe this explanation, but Eleanor was in no position to question anything. She simply nodded and gathered her belongings, following Mrs. Abernathy down the dusty main street of Wheatland. The town was larger than Eleanor had expected, but still modest by Eastern standards. A single wide street lined with wooden buildings, a general store, a bank, a saloon that seemed to be doing brisk business despite the early hour, and various other establishments. People moved about with purpose, many pausing to stare curiously at the newcomer. "The inn is just ahead," Mrs. Abernathy said, gesturing to a 2-story clapboard building painted a faded blue. "Mr. Pierce, the proprietor, has been informed of your arrival. The school is on the north edge of town, near the church. I'll show you tomorrow." As they approached the inn, the sound of hoofbeats made them both turn. A group of riders was approaching, dust billowing around them. At their head was a man whose very presence seemed to command attention, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Unlike the other men, whose clothes were covered in trail dust, he wore a clean white shirt under his open vest, though his denim pants and leather boots showed the wear of hard work. "That's Tucker Remington," Mrs. Abernathy said, lowering her voice. "Owns the largest cattle ranch in the territory, the Double R. Supplies most of the beef from here to Denver. He's just brought his men in from the North Range, looks like." Eleanor watched as the riders came to a stop outside the saloon. Tucker Remington dismounted with the easy grace of a man who had spent his life on horseback. He was saying something to his men, his voice too distant to make out, but carrying a note of authority that needed no amplification. When he turned, Eleanor caught a glimpse of his face, strong-jawed, with eyes as blue and clear as a mountain lake, framed by lines that hinted at both laughter and hardship. For a moment, those eyes met hers across the street, and Eleanor felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. She quickly looked away, reminding herself that she hadn't come west for romance. She had come to escape scandal, to rebuild her life, and the last thing she needed was to attract attention. "Mr. Remington is also on the town council," Mrs. Abernathy added. "He's quite influential in these parts, not a man to cross, but fair-minded from what I've seen." Eleanor nodded but said nothing as they continued to the inn. The thought of facing the town council, of which this imposing rancher was a member, made her stomach twist with anxiety. What if they discovered the truth about why she'd left Boston? What if rumors had somehow preceded her? The Wheatland Inn was clean and simple, with a small lobby furnished with sturdy wooden chairs and a desk behind which stood a balding man with friendly eyes. "Ah, the new schoolteacher," he exclaimed, coming forward to greet them. "Welcome to Wheatland, Miss Vaughn. I'm Harold Pierce. We're pleased to have you with us." "Thank you, Mr. Pierce," Eleanor replied, managing a genuine smile for the first time that day. The man's warmth was a welcome relief after the journey. "I've given you our best room," he continued, reaching for a key on the rack behind him. "Second floor, with a view of the mountains. It's not much compared to what you're used to back east, I expect, but it's comfortable enough." "I'm sure it will be perfect," Eleanor assured him, though in truth she had no idea what to expect. Her family home in Boston had been spacious and elegant, filled with fine furniture and art collected by generations of Vaughns. But that life was gone now, shattered by scandal and the cruelty of society. Mrs. Abernathy departed after arranging to meet Eleanor the next morning, and Mr. Pierce showed her to her room. It was indeed comfortable. If sparse, a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, a small writing desk beneath the window, and a wardrobe for her clothes. The promised view of the mountains was breathtaking, the peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. Alone at last, Eleanor sank onto the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment of weakness. Tears spilled down her cheeks as the enormity of her situation hit her. She was alone in a strange town, surrounded by wilderness and people who knew nothing of her past, which was exactly what she wanted, but terrifying nonetheless. After washing her face and changing into a fresh dress, Eleanor decided to venture downstairs for dinner. The inn's dining room was moderately full, with a mix of travelers and what appeared to be local residents. She took a table in the corner, hoping to observe without being observed, but her Eastern clothing and unfamiliar face drew curious glances. She was midway through a surprisingly good beef stew when the door opened and Tucker Remington entered, accompanied by a younger man who bore a striking resemblance to him, perhaps a brother or cousin. The rancher's presence filled the room, and conversations quieted momentarily before resuming at a slightly lower volume. To her dismay, the only available table was adjacent to hers. Tucker Remington nodded politely as he and his companion sat down, his blue eyes registering recognition from their brief street encounter. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice deep and resonant, with the hint of a southern drawl. "You must be the new schoolteacher Mrs. Abernathy mentioned was arriving today." Eleanor set down her spoon, acutely aware of her flushed cheeks. "Yes, I am. Eleanor Vaughn. I've just arrived from Boston." "Tucker Remington," he replied with a slight tip of his head. "And this is my foreman, Daniel Creighton. Welcome to Wheatland, Miss Vaughn. It's a fair distance from Boston." "That it is, Mr. Remington," she agreed, unsure how to continue the conversation without revealing too much. "What brings you all the way out here?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes shrewd. Most Eastern folks find Wyoming a bit too untamed for their liking. Eleanor had prepared for such questions. "The opportunity to teach, primarily. I've always believed education is essential, especially in developing territories." It wasn't entirely a lie. She had taught at a girls' school in Boston before everything fell apart, and she did believe in education. But the real reason she'd fled to this remote corner of Wyoming was far less noble. Tucker Remington studied her for a moment, as if trying to read between the lines of her carefully crafted answer. "Noble sentiment," he finally said. "We need more thinking like that out here. Too many see the West as just a place to make a quick fortune or escape their troubles." The pointed comment made Eleanor's heart skip a beat. Did he suspect something, or was it merely a general observation? She couldn't be sure. "The children deserve a good education, regardless of where they live," she said, steering the conversation to safer ground. "I'm looking forward to seeing the schoolhouse tomorrow." "It's not much," the rancher admitted. "Built it 4 years back. One room, about 20 pupils of various ages. You'll have your work cut out for you." Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened again, and a well-dressed man entered, his expensive suit and gold watch chain marking him as someone of means. He spotted Tucker and strode over with purpose. "Remington," he said, nodding curtly, "I need a word about that water rights issue." Tucker's expression hardened slightly, but his voice remained even. "Miss Vaughn, this is Edward Blackwood, president of the Territorial Bank and fellow council member. Blackwood, Miss Eleanor Vaughn, our new schoolteacher." The banker turned to Eleanor with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "A pleasure, Miss Vaughn. Boston, is it? I have associates there. Perhaps we know some of the same people." Eleanor felt cold dread wash over her. This was exactly what she had feared, someone with connections to Boston society. "Perhaps," she said noncommittally, "though Boston's quite large." "Indeed," Blackwood replied, his gaze lingering on her face a moment too long. "We must discuss your acquaintances sometime. For now, though, I need to speak with Mr. Remington." Tucker frowned slightly. "This isn't the time, Blackwood. Business can wait until morning." The banker's face tightened with barely suppressed irritation. "Very well. Tomorrow, then, at my office." He tipped his hat to Eleanor. "Miss Vaughn, I look forward to our next conversation." As he left, Eleanor felt panic rising in her throat. If Blackwood had contacts in Boston, it was only a matter of time before he discovered her secret. Her appetite gone, she excused herself and retreated to her room, mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. The following morning dawned bright and clear, with the crisp mountain air filling Eleanor's lungs as she accompanied Mrs. Abernathy to the schoolhouse. The simple wooden building sat on a small rise at the edge of town, a bell tower rising from its peaked roof. "It's not what you're used to, I'm sure," Mrs. Abernathy said as she unlocked the door, "but it serves its purpose." Inside, rows of simple desks faced a larger teacher's desk and blackboard. Bookshelves lined one wall, sparsely filled with worn textbooks and readers. Two large windows allowed light to flood the space, and a pot-bellied stove in the corner would provide warmth during the harsh Wyoming winters. "It's lovely," Eleanor said, meaning it. The schoolroom might be rustic, but it was clean and well-maintained. She could envision herself here, teaching children eager for knowledge. Mrs. Abernathy showed her the small living quarters attached to the rear of the schoolhouse, a bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a sitting area. "Miss Holloway lived here. Most unmarried teachers do. It's modest, but private." Eleanor felt a surge of relief. Living here would be far better than remaining at the inn, where she might encounter Blackwood or other curious residents. "It's perfect. When might I move in?" "I'll have it cleaned and prepared by tomorrow," Mrs. Abernathy promised. "Now, about your duties." The next hour was spent discussing the school term, curriculum expectations, and the various families whose children would be in Eleanor's care. By the time they finished, Eleanor felt more confident. This was something she knew how to do, something she could pour herself into. As they left the schoolhouse, Eleanor noticed Tucker Remington approaching on horseback. He dismounted smoothly and tied his horse to the hitching post. "Ladies," he greeted them, removing his hat. "Mrs. Abernathy, Miss Vaughn, how do you find our humble schoolhouse?" "It's charming," Eleanor replied honestly. "I'm looking forward to teaching here." Tucker nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Glad to hear it. We take education seriously in Wheatland." He turned to Mrs. Abernathy. "I was hoping to have a private word with Miss Vaughn, if you don't mind." The older woman raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Of course. I need to speak with Reverend Mills anyway. Miss Vaughn, I'll send word when your quarters are ready." With that, she departed, leaving Eleanor alone with the rancher. Tucker gestured to a bench beneath a cottonwood tree. "Shall we sit? It's a fair conversation to have standing in this heat." Eleanor hesitated, but then took a seat, arranging her skirts carefully. Tucker joined her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Miss Vaughn," he began, his blue eyes direct and searching. "I don't mean to pry, but I've been around long enough to recognize when someone's running from something." Eleanor stiffened, her hands clutching her reticule tightly. "Mr. Remington, I don't know what you mean." "I think you do," he said gently. "And I'm not here to judge or threaten, quite the opposite. I wanted to warn you about Edward Blackwood. He's a shrewd man with connections back east, and he seems unusually interested in your background." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "Why are you telling me this?" Tucker leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. Because whatever you're escaping from, it's your business. Out here, we believe a person should be judged by their actions, not their past. But Blackwood doesn't share that philosophy. He collects information like some collect coins and uses it when it benefits him. And you don't? Eleanor couldn't help asking, suspicion creeping into her voice. Tucker's laugh was unexpected, a warm rumble that transformed his serious face. Miss Vaughn, I have enough troubles managing 5,000 acres and several hundred head of cattle. I have no interest in complicating my life with other people's secrets. He paused, his expression growing serious again. But I do have an interest in protecting this town and its people. You're now one of those people. Eleanor didn't know what to say. This man was offering her protection without even knowing what she had done. It seemed too good to be true, and yet there was something in his straightforward gaze that compelled trust. Thank you for the warning, she finally said, but I assure you, I'm simply here to teach. Tucker studied her for a moment, then nodded, apparently accepting her non-answer. Fair enough. Just know that if you need help, my door's always open. He stood, settling his hat back on his head. Double R Ranch is about 5 miles north of town. Can't miss it. As he turned to go, Eleanor found herself calling after him. Mr. Remington, why would you help someone you barely know? He paused, looking back at her with those clear blue eyes. Because everyone deserves a fresh start, Miss Vaughn. Your past ends at my doorstep, should you ever find yourself there. With that enigmatic statement, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Eleanor to ponder his words and the unexpected warmth they had kindled within her. The following days passed in a blur of preparation as Eleanor settled into her new quarters and readied the schoolhouse for the upcoming term. She met several families from town, finding most to be welcoming if curious about the newcomer. Children peeked at her shyly from behind their mother's skirts, and Eleanor made an effort to learn each name, already mentally organizing her classes. She saw Tucker Remington occasionally in town, their exchanges brief but increasingly comfortable. He seemed to be respecting her desire for privacy, never again mentioning her past or his suspicions about it. Edward Blackwood, on the other hand, made her increasingly nervous with his pointed questions about Boston and thinly veiled references to prominent families there. The Astor summer ball must have been magnificent, he remarked one afternoon when they crossed paths outside the general store. I hear it was the social event of the season. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. The Astor ball had indeed been where everything had begun to unravel for her, though she doubted Blackwood knew the specifics yet. I wouldn't know, she replied carefully. I was indisposed that evening. Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly. How unfortunate. I believe your family has attended for years. The Vaughns are quite established in Boston society, are they not? Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood, but I must prepare for my classes, Eleanor said, desperate to escape his probing. The term begins Monday, and there's much to do. She hurried away, feeling his eyes on her back like physical pressure. How much did he know? How much was he guessing? And what would happen when the truth inevitably came to light? The weekend before classes were to begin, Eleanor was organizing textbooks when a knock came at the schoolhouse door. She opened it to find a young girl of about 16 with blonde braids and a serious expression. Miss Vaughn? I'm Sarah Remington, Tucker's sister. He asked me to bring you these. She held out a small stack of books. There's some readers and arithmetic texts from our family library. Tucker thought they might be useful since the school's collection is limited. That's very thoughtful, Eleanor said, genuinely touched as she accepted the books. They were well worn, but of good quality. Please thank your brother for me. Sarah nodded, hesitating at the doorway. Actually, there's more. Tucker sent an invitation. Tomorrow's Sunday, and after church we're having a small gathering at the ranch. Nothing formal, just some neighbors and friends. He thought you might like to meet more of the community before school starts. The invitation was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Eleanor had been keeping mostly to herself, aware that isolation wouldn't serve her well in the long run, but unsure how to integrate into the community. That's very kind, she said. I would be delighted to attend. Sarah brightened. Wonderful. Tucker will be pleased. He can bring you back to town afterward, so you needn't worry about transportation. After the girl left, Eleanor found herself wondering about Tucker Remington's motives. Was his invitation merely neighborly hospitality or something more? And why did the thought of it being something more send a flutter through her chest? Sunday morning found Eleanor attending services at Wheatland's modest white church. She sat in the back, observing the community gathered in prayer. Tucker sat several pews ahead with his sister and what appeared to be ranch hands. Blackwood occupied a front pew, his posture rigid and proper. After the service, Tucker approached as people were filing out. "Good morning, Miss Vaughn. I trust Sarah delivered my invitation." "She did, thank you. And thank you for the books as well. They'll be most useful." Tucker's smile transformed his face, softening the weathered lines around his eyes. "I'm glad. My mother was a teacher before she married my father. Those were her books." "Then I'm doubly honored," Eleanor replied, touched by the personal connection. They rode to the Double R Ranch in Tucker's wagon, with Sarah between them chatting animatedly about the upcoming school term. Eleanor was grateful for the girls' conversation, which prevented any awkward silences and gave her time to admire the landscape. The territory was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that Boston could never match. Rolling hills gave way to distant mountains, their peaks still snow-capped despite the summer heat. Wildflowers dotted the grasslands in bursts of color, and hawks circled lazily overhead. "It's breathtaking," Eleanor murmured, almost to herself. "It grows on you," Tucker said, following her gaze. "When my father first brought us here 15 years ago, I thought it was the most desolate place I'd ever seen. Now, I can't imagine being anywhere else." The Double R Ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a sprawling complex of buildings centered around a 2-story main house built of sturdy logs and stone. Corrals, barns, and bunkhouses spread outward, and in the distance, cattle grazed on the vast rangeland. "Tucker built most of it himself," Sarah said proudly. "After our parents died in 71, he took over everything. I was just 9 then." Eleanor glanced at Tucker, seeing him in a new light. To have shouldered such responsibility at a young age, he couldn't have been more than 25 or so then, and to have built this thriving ranch was no small accomplishment. "It's impressive," she said sincerely. Tucker's ears reddened slightly beneath his hat. "It's a work in progress. Always will be." The gathering was indeed small and informal, primarily ranch hands and neighbors. Eleanor was introduced to Daniel Creighton's wife, Martha, who warmly took her under her wing, introducing her to others and filling her in on local dynamics. "The Blackwoods and the Remingtons have been at odds for years," Martha explained quietly as they sat on the porch with lemonade. Edward's father tried to foreclose on this ranch after Tucker's parents died, claimed there were unpaid loans. Tucker proved in court that the loans had been paid in full, but bad blood remains. "That explains the tension between them," Eleanor said, watching as Tucker skillfully grilled beef over an open fire, occasionally calling instructions to his men. "That, and they're just different types of men," Martha continued. "Tucker believes in building things, creating something lasting. Blackwood only cares about profit and power. He's been buying up properties all over the territory." The afternoon passed pleasantly, with good food and conversation. Eleanor found herself relaxing for the first time since arriving in Wheatland, drawn into the community's easy camaraderie. Tucker was a gracious host, ensuring everyone was comfortable and fed, though Eleanor noticed he kept a certain distance from her, never seeking her out specifically, but always aware of her presence. As the sun began to set, guests started departing. Eleanor was helping Sarah clear plates when Tucker approached. "I should get you back to town before full dark," he said, "unless you'd like to stay longer." "No, you're right. I should return and finish preparing for tomorrow," Eleanor replied, suddenly reluctant to leave but knowing it was proper. The ride back was quieter, Sarah having stayed behind at the ranch. In the growing dusk, with the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky, Eleanor felt a strange peace descend upon her. "Thank you for today," she said as they approached town. "It was lovely to meet everyone." Tucker nodded, his profile strong in the fading light. "They liked you. That's not a given out here. Folks can be wary of Easterners." "Because they think we're running from something?" Eleanor asked, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. Tucker glanced at her, then back to the road. "Some are. Some just don't understand what they're getting into. The West isn't kind to the unprepared or the faint-hearted." "And which do you think I am, Mr. Remington?" He considered this for a moment. "Neither," he finally said. "You have steel in you, Miss Vaughn. Whatever brought you here, I suspect you'll not just survive, but thrive." His assessment, delivered with such quiet confidence, warmed her more than she cared to admit. As they pulled up outside the schoolhouse, Tucker came around to help her down from the wagon. His hands at her waist were strong and sure, and for a brief moment, Eleanor allowed herself to lean slightly into his steady presence. "Thank you again," she said softly. "My pleasure," he replied, his voice equally low. Their eyes held for a heartbeat longer than propriety dictated before Tucker stepped back, clearing his throat. "Best of luck tomorrow. Those children are getting a fine teacher." Eleanor watched him drive away, a strange mixture of emotions swirling within her. She'd come to Wyoming to escape her past, not to form attachments, and yet Tucker Remington was becoming difficult to keep at a distance. Monday morning arrived with a crisp breeze and clear skies. Eleanor dressed carefully in a high-necked blue dress that was professional yet practical, pinning her hair in a simple but neat arrangement. As she rang the school bell for the first time, children began appearing on the path to the schoolhouse, some running eagerly, others dragging their feet. In total, 23 pupils between the ages of 6 and 16 filed into the schoolroom, eyeing their new teacher with varying degrees of curiosity and apprehension. Eleanor recognized several from church and the ranch gathering, including 2 boys she now knew were Tucker's ranch hand's children. "Good morning," she began, offering a warm smile. "I'm Miss Vaughn, and I'm delighted to be your teacher this year. We'll begin by learning each other's names and then discuss what we'll be studying this term." The day passed quickly as Eleanor assessed her pupils' knowledge and assigned readings. The children were generally well-behaved, if somewhat behind in certain subjects compared to their Eastern counterparts. By the time she dismissed them in the afternoon, Eleanor felt cautiously optimistic about the term ahead. As the last child departed, she noticed Edward Blackwood standing across the street, watching. He tipped his hat when he saw her notice him, then crossed to the schoolhouse. "Miss Vaughn, congratulations on your first day," he said smoothly. "I trust the children weren't too difficult?" "Not at all," Eleanor replied, maintaining a polite smile while inwardly tensing. "They seem eager to learn." "Indeed, education is vital, even in these remote parts." Blackwood paused, his eyes calculating. "I received a letter from Boston yesterday, from a Mr. Harrison Pembroke. Do you know him by chance?" Eleanor's blood ran cold. Harrison Pembroke was her former fiancé's father, a powerful man in Boston society and one who had been instrumental in her downfall. "The name sounds vaguely familiar," she managed to say, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing heart. "He mentions a scandal involving a young teacher from a good family. Quite shocking, apparently." Blackwood's tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "Something about impropriety with a student. The young woman fled west, I understand." Eleanor gripped the doorframe, feeling as though the ground were shifting beneath her feet. "Mr. Blackwood, if you have something to say, please say it directly." His smile was predatory. "Very well. I know who you are, Miss Vaughn, and why you're here. The question is, do the good people of Wheatland deserve to know that their children's teacher was dismissed from her previous position under a cloud of moral turpitude?" "It wasn't like that," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those accusations were false." "Perhaps, but scandal follows one regardless of truth, doesn't it?" Blackwood stepped closer. "I'm on the town council, Miss Vaughn. One word from me about your history and your position here would be untenable." "What do you want?" Eleanor asked, already knowing the answer would be unpleasant. "Nothing unreasonable, just your support in certain matters before the council. Tucker Remington holds considerable sway, and he opposes my development plans for the territory. A voice against him would be useful." "You want me to spy on Mr. Remington?" Eleanor was aghast. "Not spy. Simply advocate for progress when the time comes." Blackwood straightened his already immaculate jacket. "Think about it, Miss Vaughn. You're secret for your cooperation. It seems a fair exchange." With that, he departed, leaving Eleanor trembling in the schoolhouse doorway. That evening, Eleanor paced her small quarters, mind racing. Blackwood's threat hung over her like an executioner's axe. If the truth, or rather, Harrison Pembroke's version of it, became known in Wheatland, she would lose not just her position, but any chance of building a new life here. The scandal that had driven her from Boston had been a fabrication, but a devastatingly effective one. Eleanor had been teaching at the prestigious Pembroke Academy for Young Ladies when she'd caught the eye of Harrison's son, James. Their courtship had been proper and eventually led to an engagement that pleased both families. But when Eleanor discovered James's unsavory gambling habits and confronted him, he broke the engagement. Humiliated and seeking revenge, he accused Eleanor of improper conduct with a male colleague at the school. His father, protecting his son's reputation, ensured the accusation spread through Boston society. Though there was no truth to it, the whispers and ostracism had made Eleanor's position untenable. Her own family, concerned with their social standing, had suggested she visit relatives in the West until the scandal died down. Now, it seemed, her past had caught up with her. But the cruelest part was Blackwood's demand that she betray Tucker Remington's trust, the one person who had offered her unconditional acceptance. Sleep eluded her that night, and when morning came, Eleanor faced her pupils with dark circles beneath her eyes and a heavy heart. The day passed in a fog, and when school dismissed, she found herself walking aimlessly through town, seeking some solution to her dilemma. Her feet carried her to the edge of town, where the road stretched northward toward the Double R Ranch. Tucker's words echoed in her mind. "Your past ends at my doorstep." Could she trust him with the truth? Would he still offer protection if he knew the specifics of the scandal she'd fled? Before she could debate further, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Tucker himself was riding toward town, his expression brightening when he spotted her. "Miss Vaughn," he greeted her, dismounting. "Taking the air after a day of teaching?" "Something like that," she replied, trying to muster a smile. Tucker studied her face, his brow furrowing. "You seem troubled. Is everything all right?" The concern in his voice nearly undid her composure. It's nothing. Just adjusting to my new responsibilities." He didn't appear convinced, but didn't press. Instead, he gestured to the horizon, where clouds were building. "Storm's coming. May I walk you back to the schoolhouse?" They walked in companionable silence for a few minutes, Tucker leading his horse. Eleanor was acutely aware of his presence beside her, solid, reassuring, and increasingly dear to her despite her attempts to maintain emotional distance. "The children can't stop talking about their new teacher," Tucker said eventually. "Sarah says you've already got them reciting poetry and calculating sums they couldn't manage before." Eleanor felt a genuine smile forming. "They're bright children, eager to learn." "That's high praise from a Boston-educated teacher," Tucker remarked, then seemed to regret his words when Eleanor's smile faltered. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to remind you of whatever it is you left behind." "It's all right," Eleanor said softly. "Boston seems very far away now." "But not far enough?" Tucker guessed, his perception unsettling her. They had reached the schoolhouse, and Eleanor paused at the steps, wrestling with indecision. Thunder rumbled in the distance, matching her inner turmoil. "Mr. Remington." "Tucker," she began, his given name feeling intimate on her lips. "If I tell you something, will you promise to hear me out completely before judging?" His expression grew serious. "I meant what I said before, Eleanor. Your past ends at my doorstep. Whatever it is, you can tell me." Taking a deep breath, Eleanor recounted the entire story: her teaching position, her engagement to James Pembroke, his gambling and subsequent revenge, and now Blackwood's threats. Throughout her tale, Tucker's expression remained unreadable, though his eyes darkened when she described Blackwood's attempt at blackmail. When she finished, silence stretched between them, broken only by another distant roll of thunder. Eleanor's hands were trembling, and she clasped them tightly before her. "So," she said finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, "now you know everything." Tucker's voice was quiet, but firm when he responded. "I knew Blackwood was a snake, but this is low, even for him." He stepped closer, his gaze intent. "Eleanor, I believe you, and I'll stand by you against Blackwood or anyone else who tries to use your past against you." Relief washed over Eleanor like a cleansing rain. "You believe me? Just like that? I've watched you with those children, seen how you interact with people in town. I'm a fair judge of character, and there's not a dishonest bone in your body." His hand reached out hesitantly to touch hers. "Besides, Blackwood wouldn't be trying to blackmail you if the accusations were true. He'd just expose you outright." The logic was sound, but it was the touch of his hand on hers that undid Eleanor's remaining composure. Tears spilled down her cheeks as weeks of tension and fear found release. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "If he tells the council—" "He won't," Tucker said with quiet confidence, "because we're going to call his bluff." The rain started to fall, fat droplets that quickly intensified. Tucker glanced at the sky, then back at Eleanor. "May I come in? We should discuss this further, and I'd prefer not to do so in a downpour." Inside the schoolhouse, Eleanor lit a lamp against the gathering gloom and stoked the small stove to ward off the sudden chill brought by the storm. Tucker removed his hat, running a hand through his hair as he paced the classroom, clearly thinking. "Blackwood's playing a dangerous game," he said finally. "Attempting to blackmail a council-appointed teacher could backfire on him severely if exposed." "But it would still mean exposing my past," Eleanor pointed out, sinking into her chair at the teacher's desk. Tucker stopped pacing and faced her. "Not necessarily. What if we preempt him? You tell the council your version of events before he can tell his. Most folks around here have little love for Blackwood, and they've already taken to you." The idea was terrifying, but not without merit. "Do you really think they'd believe me over the word of someone like Harrison Pembroke?" Tucker's smile was grim. "Harrison Pembroke isn't here. You are. And out here, we judge people by what we see, not by gossip from 2,000 miles away." Outside, lightning flashed, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Eleanor jumped, and Tucker moved instinctively to her side. "It's directly overhead," he said, his voice reassuring. "Storm like this won't last long, but it's fierce while it's here." Their proximity sent Eleanor's heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the storm. Tucker seemed to realize how close they were standing and took a small step back, maintaining propriety. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "People will talk if I'm seen leaving the schoolhouse after dark, and you don't need more gossip." "Yes, of course," Eleanor agreed, though part of her wished he would stay. Storm and propriety be damned. Tucker retrieved his hat but paused at the door. "Tomorrow evening, there's a council meeting at the town hall. Come with me. We'll address this head-on, together." The word "together" sent a flutter through Eleanor's chest. "You'd stand with me?" Without hesitation. His eyes held hers, conveying a depth of feeling that words couldn't express. "Get some rest, Eleanor. Tomorrow we fight back." After he left, braving the downpour to return to his horse, Eleanor stood at the window watching until his figure disappeared into the stormy night. For the first time since arriving in Wheatland, she felt something like hope taking root alongside the growing affection for the steadfast rancher. The following day passed in a blur of lessons and nervous anticipation. When the final bell rang, Eleanor dismissed her pupils and spent extra time tidying the schoolroom, anything to keep her mind occupied. She changed into her best dress, a deep green that brought out the amber flecks in her hazel eyes, and pinned her hair in a more elaborate style than usual. As promised, Tucker arrived to escort her to the meeting. His appreciative glance when she opened the door made her cheeks warm. "You look lovely," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, gathering her courage along with her shawl. "I thought it might help to look composed." Tucker offered his arm, which she took gratefully. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." The town hall was already half full when they arrived. Eleanor recognized most of the faces, parents of her pupils, shopkeepers, ranchers from the surrounding area. Mrs. Abernathy nodded to her from her seat at the council table, where Reverend Mills and Harold Pierce from the inn were also seated. Edward Blackwood occupied a chair at the end, his expression darkening when he saw Eleanor enter on Tucker's arm. The meeting began with routine matters reports on road repairs, discussion of the upcoming harvest festival, approval for a new addition to the general store. Eleanor sat tensely beside Tucker, waiting for the moment when Blackwood would speak. It came as the meeting was winding down. "Before we adjourn," Blackwood said smoothly, "I have a matter of some delicacy to discuss regarding our new schoolteacher." Tucker squeezed Eleanor's hand beneath the cover of her skirts, then stood. "Actually, Blackwood, Miss Vaughn has requested to address the council first. As a council member, I move to hear her." Reverend Mills, who was chairing the meeting, looked surprised but nodded. "Miss Vaughn, you have the floor." Eleanor rose on shaky legs, acutely aware of all eyes upon her. Tucker remained standing beside her, a silent pillar of support. "Thank you, Reverend Mills, council members, and citizens of Wheatland," she began, her teacher's training helping her project her voice clearly despite her nerves. "I came to your town seeking a fresh start, and you have welcomed me with open arms. For that, I am deeply grateful." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "However, I recently learned that Mr. Blackwood has received correspondence from Boston containing accusations about my character and the circumstances of my departure. Before he shares those accusations, I would like to tell you the truth myself." With as much dignity as she could muster, Eleanor recounted the same story she had told Tucker, omitting only the most personal details of her broken engagement. Throughout her account, she kept her head high, her voice steady, though inside she was trembling. "I understand if these revelations cause you to question my fitness as your children's teacher," she concluded, "but I give you my word that the accusations against me were false. I have always conducted myself with propriety and will continue to do so. I ask only that you judge me by my actions here in Wheatland, not by malicious gossip from my past." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd as Eleanor resumed her seat. Tucker's hand found hers again, squeezing gently in silent approval. Blackwood was on his feet immediately. "A compelling tale, Miss Vaughn, but Mr. Pembroke's letter tells a rather different story. He describes you as a woman of loose morals who took advantage of her position to seduce—" "That's enough, Blackwood," Tucker interrupted, his voice like steel. "Miss Vaughn has given her account, and having known her these past weeks, I find it far more credible than the words of a man none of us has met, filtered through your interpretation." Mrs. Abernathy cleared her throat. "I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Remington. Miss Vaughn has conducted herself admirably since arriving in Wheatland. Her pupils are thriving under her tutelage." "Indeed," added Reverend Mills. "Judge not, lest ye be judged. Miss Vaughn's past is between her and God. Her present is what concerns this council." Blackwood's face had reddened with anger. "You're all being hoodwinked by a pretty face. This woman is not what she appears to be." "And you, Mr. Blackwood?" Eleanor found her voice strengthened by the support surrounding her. "Are you what you appear to be? A banker concerned with the community's welfare? Or a man who attempted to blackmail me into supporting your agenda against Mr. Remington?" Gasps echoed through the hall. Blackwood's expression contorted with rage. "How dare you? These are baseless accusations." "Are they?" Tucker stepped forward. "Miss Vaughn informed me yesterday that you threatened to expose her past unless she helped undermine my position on the council. That sounds like blackmail to me." The tide of opinion in the room was visibly turning against Blackwood. Harold Pierce spoke up from his place at the council table. "I've had enough of your schemes, Edward. First trying to foreclose on the Wilsons' farm last winter, now this. I move that we censure Mr. Blackwood and review his position on this council." "Seconded," Mrs. Abernathy said firmly. What followed was a heated discussion that ended with a vote of no confidence in Blackwood, effectively removing him from the council pending a formal hearing. As for Eleanor, the council unanimously confirmed her position as Wheatland's schoolteacher, with several parents standing to voice their support. When the meeting finally adjourned, Eleanor found herself surrounded by well-wishers, many expressing admiration for her courage in confronting Blackwood. Through it all, Tucker remained at her side, his steady presence anchoring her amid the emotional tumult. As they finally stepped out into the cool evening air, Eleanor felt lightheaded with relief. "I can't believe it worked," she murmured. "They believed me." "Of course they did," Tucker replied, offering his arm again as they walked back toward the schoolhouse. "You've earned their trust these past weeks. That counts for more than some letter from Boston." Eleanor glanced at him, her heart full of gratitude and something deeper. Something she was only now allowing herself to acknowledge. "I couldn't have done it without you, Tucker. Your support gave me the courage to speak." They stopped outside the schoolhouse, the moon casting silver light across the deserted street. Tucker turned to face her, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Eleanor," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "I told you your past ends at my doorstep. I meant it. But I find myself hoping. That is, I wonder if your future might begin there as well." Her breath caught. "Tucker?" He took her hands in his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm not a man of flowery words, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. These past weeks, getting to know you, I've never met anyone like you. Your strength, your kindness, the way you face your troubles head on." Eleanor's heart was racing, hope and joy threatening to overwhelm her. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I'm falling in love with you," Tucker said simply. "And if you could see your way clear to giving me a chance, I'd count myself the luckiest man in Wyoming territory." Tears of happiness sprang to Eleanor's eyes. "Oh, Tucker, I've been fighting my feelings because I was afraid that my past would always shadow my future. But you make me believe in new beginnings." Tucker's smile was radiant in the moonlight. "Is that a yes?" In answer, Eleanor rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Tucker's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "That," Eleanor said softly, "was definitely a yes." Their courtship proceeded with proper decorum over the following months, though few in town were surprised when Tucker began calling regularly at the schoolhouse. Eleanor flourished as a teacher, introducing new books and methods that expanded her pupils' horizons. Tucker's support never wavered, and he often assisted with school projects, teaching the children about ranching and the natural history of the territory. Edward Blackwood left Wheatland soon after his censure, relocating to Cheyenne where, it was rumored, he found himself unwelcome in banking circles after word of his attempted blackmail spread. His departure removed the last shadow hanging over Eleanor's new life. As winter blanketed the territory in snow, Tucker proposed formally, presenting Eleanor with a simple but elegant ring that had belonged to his mother. Their wedding in the spring of 1879 was the social event of the season, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. Sarah Remington stood as Eleanor's maid of honor, beaming with happiness at gaining the sister she'd always wanted. Eleanor moved to the Double R Ranch, though she continued teaching at the Wheatland School, making the daily journey with dedication that earned her even greater respect from the community. Tucker expanded the main house, adding a library filled with books that Eleanor selected with care, many ordered specially from publishers back east. In the years that followed, the Double R prospered under their joint stewardship. Eleanor brought her educational background to the ranch's operations, improving record-keeping and correspondence with cattle buyers, while Tucker's innate understanding of the land and livestock ensured their herds remained the finest in the territory. Their first child, a son they named Thomas, arrived in the winter of 1880, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Rebecca. Both children inherited their father's blue eyes and their mother's quick intelligence, growing up surrounded by books and wide-open spaces, the best of both their parents' worlds. Eleanor occasionally received news from Boston through correspondence with a former colleague who had stood by her during the scandal. Harrison Pembroke had lost much of his fortune in bad investments, and his son, James, had been forced to marry a wealthy but aging widow to maintain his lifestyle. The gossip that had once seemed so important now felt distant and irrelevant to Eleanor's full and meaningful life. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Tucker surprised Eleanor with a trip to Denver, where they attended the opera and dined in fine restaurants. In their hotel room afterward, Eleanor nestled against her husband's chest, content in a way she had never imagined possible when she'd first stepped off that train in Wheatland. "Any regrets?" Tucker asked, stroking her hair. "About leaving Boston? About choosing this life instead?" Eleanor raised her head to meet his gaze, seeing in his eyes the same love and steadfast support that had been her salvation. "Not a single one," she said truthfully. "You promised my past would end at your doorstep. What you gave me instead was a future beyond my wildest dreams." Tucker smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with happiness. "And we're just getting started, Mrs. Remington. Just getting started." As they sealed this promise with a kiss, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home, not in a place, but in the heart of the man who had seen past her scandal to the woman she truly was, and in the life they had built together on the wild and beautiful frontier. 10 years after Eleanor first arrived in Wheatland, the R Ranch hosted a celebration for the town's founding anniversary. The property had grown even more prosperous, now encompassing over 8,000 acres with several hundred employees. The main house had been expanded again to accommodate their growing family, which now included a 3rd child, young William, born in 1885. As Eleanor supervised the preparations for the festivities, she reflected on how completely her life had transformed. The frightened woman who had stepped off the train that day, clutching her valise and her secrets, seemed like a stranger now. In her place stood a confident woman of 32, respected throughout the territory not just as Tucker Remington's wife, but as a force in her own right. She had continued teaching for 5 years after her marriage, eventually training a successor when William's birth made the daily journey to town too difficult to manage. Now she focused her educational efforts on the ranch, where she had established a school for the workers' children and a small library that served the entire community. Tucker found her on the porch, watching as ranch hands erected tables and benches for the celebration. He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close against his side. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Eleanor smiled up at him, still moved by the love she saw in his eyes after all these years. "I was just thinking about beginnings and endings, how what seemed like the end of my life in Boston was really just the beginning of something far better." Tucker's laugh was warm against her hair. "Philosophy before noon? You've been reading those Greek fellows again, haven't you?" "Perhaps," she admitted with a smile, "but it's true nonetheless. When you told me my past ended at your doorstep, I had no idea what a gift you were really offering." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their children, running from the direction of the creek, clothes damp and faces flushed with excitement. "Papa! Mama!" Thomas called, his 11-year-old voice cracking slightly. "We caught fish for the feast! 3 big ones!" 9-year-old Rebecca, her dark hair escaping its braids, held up their catch proudly. "Will made the net that caught the biggest one." 5-year-old William beamed at this acknowledgement from his older sister, his chest puffing out with pride. "I tied the knots just like you showed me, Papa." Tucker ruffled his youngest son's hair affectionately. Fine work, all of you. Those will make a welcome addition to our table tonight." As the children ran off to deliver their catch to the cook, Eleanor leaned into her husband's embrace. "They're growing so fast," she observed. "Thomas is nearly as tall as I am already." "He'll be running this ranch someday," Tucker said with obvious pride. "Rebecca, too, if she has anything to say about it. That girl's got more business sense at 9 than most grown men." "She gets that from her father," Eleanor teased. Tucker shook his head. "From her mother, more like. Don't think I haven't noticed how you've doubled our profits with those new breeding programs you researched." Their easy banter was a comfortable routine, built on years of partnership that had grown deeper and stronger with each challenge they'd faced together. From harsh winters that threatened their herds to economic downturns that strained their finances, they had weathered every storm by standing united. The celebration that evening was a resounding success. The entire town of Wheatland turned out, along with ranchers and farmers from miles around. Tables groaned under the weight of food, a band played lively tunes for dancing, and children darted between groups of adults in impromptu games of tag. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Eleanor found herself seated beside Mrs. Abernathy, now in her 70s, but still sharp as ever. "I remember when you first came to Wheatland," the older woman reminisced. "So proper in your Eastern clothes, looking like a strong wind might blow you away. Who would have thought you'd become the backbone of this community?" Eleanor smiled, touched by the compliment. "I had good people helping me find my way. You among them, Mrs. Abernathy." "Pish," the old woman dismissed the gratitude with a wave. "I just showed you the schoolhouse. It was Tucker Remington who truly saw what you could become." She glanced to where Tucker stood talking with some of his ranch hands, still handsome and vital at 42. "That man looked at you like you hung the moon from the very first day. Some of us had a wager on how long it would take him to propose." "Did you really?" Eleanor laughed. "Who won?" "Reverend Mills," Mrs. Abernathy admitted with a chuckle. "He said Tucker would wait a proper 6 months out of respect for your position. The rest of us thought he'd be too smitten to wait that long." Eleanor shook her head, amused by the thought of the town betting on a romance. "And here I believed we were being so discreet." "My dear, in a town like Wheatland there are no secrets." Mrs. Abernathy patted her hand. "But sometimes that's a blessing. We all knew Blackwood was trouble long before he tried to use your past against you." The mention of Blackwood was rare these days. After leaving Wheatland, he had indeed relocated to Cheyenne, where his unscrupulous business practices eventually caught up with him. Last Eleanor had heard, he had moved further west to California, having worn out his welcome in Wyoming territory. Whatever became of him was no more than he deserved, Eleanor said without rancor. Time had healed those wounds completely. As the evening progressed, Tucker claimed Eleanor for a dance, sweeping her into a waltz with the same grace that had surprised her at their wedding. His arm around her waist was steady and sure, his steps leading her effortlessly across the makeshift dance floor. "Have I told you today how beautiful you are, Mrs. Remington?" he murmured, blue eyes twinkling in the lantern light. "Only twice," she replied with a smile. "You're falling behind schedule." His laugh, still her favorite sound after all these years, rumbled from deep in his chest. "Can't have that. You are beautiful, Eleanor, more so with every passing year." Eleanor felt a blush warm her cheeks, delighted that he could still affect her this way. "Flatterer. Truth-teller," he corrected, pulling her a fraction closer than propriety strictly allowed, "and the luckiest man in Wyoming territory." Later, as the celebration wound down and guests began departing, Eleanor and Tucker stood on the porch of their home, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the last wagons disappear down the long drive. Their children had long since been put to bed, exhausted from the day's excitement. "Another successful Founder's Day," Tucker observed, "though I still think we should call it Eleanor's Day instead. This town wasn't truly founded until you arrived." Eleanor nudged him playfully. "Now you're just being ridiculous. Wheatland existed for 20 years before I ever set foot here." "Existed, yes, but it didn't come alive until then." Tucker's expression grew serious as he turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. You know I'm not one for fancy speeches, but I've been thinking lately about how different my life would be if you hadn't gotten off that train that day. Everything I am, everything we've built together, it all began with you being brave enough to start over. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. It began with you being kind enough to offer me that fresh start. Your past ends at my doorstep, you said. I'll never forget those words. Tucker reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch still sending shivers down her spine after all their years together. Best thing I ever said, apparently, though I had no idea then that I was inviting my future to walk through that door as well. In the moonlit quiet of the ranch, with the distant sounds of nature surrounding them and the solid warmth of home at their backs, Eleanor leaned into her husband's embrace. The scandal that had once defined her had long since faded to insignificance, replaced by the rich tapestry of a life well lived with the man she loved. "Take me to bed, husband," she whispered against his chest. Tucker's arms tightened around her. "With pleasure, wife." As they walked together into their home, Eleanor reflected that some endings truly were just beginnings in disguise. Her past had ended at Tucker's doorstep, but her future, their future, stretched out before them, as vast and full of promise as the Wyoming sky above.